Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad that you're here and you're listening into the podcast. Really appreciate you. I know I say it all the time, and I will continue to say it because there is no podcast without you listening. So thank you for listening and helping us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you. And it would be a big help to keep the podcast going if you would go over, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really appreciate that. All right. Now, today, and by the way, for those of us who are on YouTube, we're going to do audio, but we're still here. All right. Now, today, I'm talking with Leezel Ramos. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Leezel. She is dedicated to caring for the whole person, professional formation, and empowering leaders for a more just and humane world. And she shares her gifts of service, justice, collaborative leadership, and excellence through her current role as Executive Director of Career and Professional Development at Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles, which, by the way, is LA's only women's university, and it's also where I teach. And before that, Lizelle shared her gifts on both the employer relations and education side as Associate Director at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Seattle University, respectively. Welcome, Lizelle Ramos.
Happy to be here, Robin.
So glad you're here. Okay, so now you heard my introduction. Why don't you tell us in your own words, tell us a little bit about you and the work you do?
For sure. Well, hi again to your lovely audience. My name's Leezel, she, her. And as Robin says, I currently serve as Executive Director of Career and Professional Development here at Mount St. Mary's in Los Angeles. And while over the arc of my career in higher education, Robin, career development has truly been the common thread. Having been myself a first generation college student from a limited income and immigrant household, when I had the opportunity to serve as a college access coordinator early in my career, it felt like I was coming full circle, preparing students with a similar background for college and career success. During my graduate studies, I managed community engagement leadership programs where I activated students to care about causes impacting the world around them. This ultimately led to conversations on how to turn their advocacy into a career, or at least how to pursue careers that could sustain their activism. And so that unlocked for me this larger vision that my work in career development is leadership development, that career development is student retention work, and that career development work is social justice work. And so, over the years, I've stepped into leadership roles charged with innovating university career services, transforming it from a department into a campus-wide strategy, alongside a wonderful team of colleagues across the institution, including yourself, to ensure that our students gain career-aligned guidance and experiences both in and outside of the classroom. So that's what I do.
Yes, and I'm glad you do that and you're good at it. And the reason why I invited you to share on the podcast is because my experience of you is that you really have a sense of passion for the work you do and it's meaningful. And I guessed that it was in alignment with your purpose. And there might be people listening who are like, well, I don't really know. I don't really know how to find my purpose or where to even begin. And I would like to have a career that expresses my purpose. And so I talk to people like you, Lizelle, who have it to inspire others that it is possible. And so that's part of the reason why you're here today. So I appreciate you for being here and for sharing that.
Thank you.
And so now I said that. So now do you feel like you have a sense of purpose in your work?
Oh, yeah. As I described earlier, I view career development as a tool for social justice. So being a community organizer was the most salient identity for me for many years, which first formed when I had the privilege of taking ethnic studies in high school and continued to learn through formal and informal educational settings. So I was exposed to and have since practiced coalition building through deep listening and finding and expressing values alignment. So for me, to build a movement, a leader needs to know how to articulate a vision that is inspirational and motivating, using radical imagination, and compels others into action by building symbiotic relationships in community care. My experience in multi-generational community organizing has really trained me to skillfully translate a large vision into very concrete, practical steps for a variety of audiences and stakeholders. So perhaps in that context, the vision could be as big as democracy and making it personable and actionable for individuals. In the context of university career services and the work that I do, it's cultivating a culture and curriculum of professional formation tied to the very mission of the institution and how that propels the work my colleagues across the institution and what they're already doing, and supporting our diverse students in actualizing their dreams and aspirations. So this is not new to you, Robin, that in the context of our work at Mount St. Mary's, 80% of our traditional undergraduate students identify as women of color, almost 70% are first-generation college students, and almost 60% of our undergrads are eligible for Pell Grants, which makes the work that I do have the potential to be intergenerationally transformative for our students, to fulfill the promise of higher education for economic security and beyond, the same message that was told to me when I was in their shoes.
Okay, this is very interesting, the connection that you're making between, what you're doing now and back then when you were in their shoes. Did
Mhm.
you have a sense then, like I know you said you were interested in it, but did you have a sense like that would be the direction of your career at all, or something that you were interested in for the future?
Well, I know wholeheartedly that I'm a mission-driven person. So perhaps I didn't have the words mission-driven
Hmm.
at the time as a young person, but when I was in high school as a community organizer, specifically around immigrant communities, it was the connection that our local colleges, where I grew up, made coming out to different high schools in the area and talking about the connection of how being involved and going to college connects to, again, that promise of economic security, especially when coming from a limited income and immigrant household. And so, as a way, right, to that, I mean, who doesn't, who, that sounds great to everybody, right? And I feel like
Right.
we still tell that story to students today. I just work in the realm of making sure we fulfill that promise to students, right? And so that purpose fuels my motivation. I need to understand and be grounded in the why. The racial justice aspect to that is addressing the racial wealth gap in this country, right? And sometimes pursuing passion can be seen as a privilege. So, how do we expand that ability, the space for our students to really honor their talents and gifts in ways that perhaps they felt like they couldn't have before? So I feel like I'm really lucky to have reflected a lot on this and feel a strong sense of clarity. And I really do credit my Jesuit Catholic graduate education and working in Catholic higher ed for building in intentional time to do so. So whether through my studies or being in a workplace where my supervisors modeled and encouraged discernment, it's a stark contrast compared to when I was working at non-faith-based institutions or public institutions. However, I do have to remind myself that just because I can connect the dots between my own purpose and practice, that process is going to look different for everyone. And everyone's in a different place on their own journey towards aligning their purpose and practice.
Yes, and hopefully conversations like these will help them connect some of the dots in their own lives just by hearing the stories of others who have connected the dots. So speaking of that, do you think it was intentional that you just said, okay, this is going to be my direction and, it's in alignment with my purpose, or did you sort of stumble across it?
That's a good question. I think it really was the stars aligning with the right mentors in place. For mentors, and I've thought about this in response to some of the other questions I had prepared for our conversation about folks in your community and others who see things in you that you may not see in yourself. And so being able to get that feedback and then reflect on, when do I feel energized? When do I feel activated to do something and motivated? And how do I connect it to social justice and making the lives of others better? How do we transform this world into a place that gives me hope? And for other folks, how do we dismantle systems of oppression so that everyone has a chance, right, to self actualize and work towards self determination?
Yes, and you gave us something to think about too for people who are wondering like where in their path, and you talked about what energizes you, or also listening to others who might see things in you that you don't see yourselves. So those are good tips for people who are, seeking. All right. So now let me just, this is a little bit off script, and if you don't have it, that's okay. Before high school, you said that's when sort of the college representatives, or you got this notion of, what I'm calling making a difference. Was there anything about little Liesel who was like passionate about? Do you remember anything that you enjoyed doing that you think could connect to what you're doing now, or your heart for justice? Was there anything that you can think of that you did or that came naturally to you when you were just little Liesel?
That is a good question. And hmm, honestly, sometimes I think I do this work in spite of the messages that I received growing up. Like my parents left their home countries from very rural and impoverished situations. And honestly, I think hearing their stories of like helplessness or hopelessness made me want to look at the world very differently. And I didn't have the language of privilege, but having now the privilege to be in a country where perhaps more things are possible, right? How do I create circumstances that cultivate a sense of hope? Where folks feel like they're seen and have options in ways that my parents felt like they didn't have options or perhaps only had one option for the chance, right? Maybe not for them, but for their family as a whole or their children to achieve something differently or better. And so, yeah, I think it's all grounded in hope that things could be different in ways that the messages I received from my parents where there wasn't a lot of.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And for those who are listening, there's a lesson in there. So for you, Lizelle, it was you saw the situation that you wanted to see changed, or to the challenges that came with your parents' experience, and so you wanted to offer hope. And so for people looking back at their early lives, it could be something that really struck you and that was what we might call positive, and
Mm.
or as something like this that was challenging, and that kind of spark something in you that you might want to make a change. So start looking back at your life and just kind of give some reflection to that, and you might get a spark. I think I'm going to start calling these purpose clues.
Hmm.
Get
Yeah.
some purpose clues. Look back at your life and see how that might be a purpose clues, like in the case of Lizelle. All right. So now, do you think we talked about this already, you have a sense of purpose, but do you think it's important for others to have a sense of purpose in their work?
Yeah, totally. I think having a sense of purpose, again, it creates an intrinsic motivation, gets you up in the morning. And for me, and maybe it's my own set of values that says to be in service to not just others, but in service of creating a better world, right? So to create that change. And you and I both, Robin, have been knee deep in research and responding to this charge of helping students become more in tune with their purpose and creating an intentional college experience that allows them to apply that purpose towards a career or calling. So here at the Mount, given its mission, I'm energized by the call to empower women and gender expansive students as a women's college. And I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to serve a student population that reflects a rich diversity like that I grew up in, both as a Hispanic serving institution and NAPZ federally designated university. And, I truly believe our students are industry leaders of tomorrow, whether government, healthcare, science research, or business. I have no doubt that our students will lead those entities towards a more just and humane world. And that's important to me because if we can impact our future leaders, that will only again create more hope and a better world for those who come after them.
Absolutely. And I love the through line again from, your early life in this whole notion of hope, and that you get to express it in different ways. And that's another hint for people too. It can look different ways in the work you do. You could, whatever the thing is that's on your heart, or that was on your heart when you were, younger, much younger, or the thing that you wanted to fix or change when you were much younger. It doesn't have to look a particular way. You can express it in different ways and through different career options. So I think, Lizelle, that your story is an example of that. Your career journey is an example of that.
Yes, and that reminds me that there is no one right way, but there is an intentional way, right? So sometimes, like, the best advice I like to offer is to utilize a both and approach. Do the internal work of discernment and be in community with trusted mentors and peers who can offer insight you might not be aware of, like when you light up or how you've grown over time. Identify your strengths and understand which of them brings you joy and which don't. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you want to do it all the time. And be unwavering in your values and honor changes to your life priorities. So, again, ask yourself what you do know and what you want to learn. There is no one right way, but an intentional way. So, I would encourage others to gift themselves the time and energy to do just that.
I love that. And of course, you and I are in alignment. We've had many conversations. But as you know, I have a book coming out in the near future. And that's part of what I teach in the book to get in alignment with your purpose is not only the things that you are, what I call a part of your natural abilities, and not only your passions, because like you say, just because you can do something, you're good at it, doesn't mean you want to do it. Because you're probably good
Mhm.
at lots of things that you might not be so passionate about. So you and I are definitely in alignment in that regard. All right. So the podcast is for, and you've already given us some nuggets, but I'm still going to put this one forth. The podcast is for high achieving women, particularly those seeking more meaning and purpose in their work. And they can be at any point in their career. They could be just early career and trying to figure out mid career, haven't done this for a while now and thinking, oh, there must be more. Or even
Mhm.
in their later years after really senior career and saying, I really need a change or I don't know really what I want to do next. So those are the high achieving women we're talking to right now. And so, based on that description, what advice would you give? And I know you've given us some nuggets already, but what's some other advice you would give to that woman, either from your professional experience or from your personal experience?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to double down on the both and approach, and that the sense of purpose and aligning that to your practice and your career pathway doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? So it's not what happened to little Liesel that created my purpose. It was because I was in community and in relationship, and the experience with others, whether it be my parents, seeing their outlook and wanting to change the world so that others can have a more hopeful outlook, to finding the right mentors who saw things in me and identified my strengths that I wasn't aware of. And then being able to internalize and recognize kind of those purpose clues
Mhm.
using your terminology of like, oh, look at you, just coined something today. And you being able to identify those purpose clues and connect the dots to be able to then articulate right for yourself the clarity and the motivation you need to take an intentional step forward.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So now, is there anything that I haven't asked you or that we haven't discussed that comes to mind or that you're thinking, oh, just one more thing before we tell people how they can stay in touch with you if they want to?
Just this has been great. I love talking about purpose and passion and how that ties to not only our career but to meet the needs of the world and how to make the world a better place. Because again, your career is your own path, but the impact you make, whether through your career or what your career enables you to do outside of your 9 to 5, right, is still communal and it's still in community and still in relationship with others.
Yes, I resonate with that. Of course, I would. All right. So tell people where they can be in touch with you in case they want to hear more about what you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. I would say LinkedIn would probably be the best. Leezel Ramos, Leezel space Ramos, Ramos. Find me on LinkedIn. You can follow, send a message, and I'd be happy to chat and connect.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Lizelle, for I know you have a lot going on, especially in this moment. So thank you so much for taking time out and sharing your wisdom and your heart and your passion with us. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Robin. Anytime.
Okay, everyone, I'd love to hear your response to the episode. I am at Robin L. Owens, PhD on all channels, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I can let you know you can be amongst the first to know when I open the wait list for my upcoming book, Becoming a Purpose Maker, where I talk through the 10 steps to help you get on your way to not only find your purpose, but to stay in alignment with your purpose because you know how to make purpose aligned decisions. So follow me at Robin L. Owens, PhD, LinkedIn, and you'll be the first to find out. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.